as a leader, the number one thing you can do is become a spiritual magnet. Make sure people trust you. They trust your heart, God entrusts to those he trusts. So become a leader that people and also God can trust, because then he will flow resources through you.
Welcome, everybody. You're listening to the GrowLeader podcast, where we grow leaders that grow churches by helping them reach their full potential. So glad you're here with us today. My name's Matt. If you're brand new to us, be sure to go to growleader.com for all things GrowLeader. I'm sitting next to my pastor, Pastor Chris Hodges. PC, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Happy Thanksgiving, man.
I'm ready for it.
Yeah, I've already started cooking the dressing that our family has been eating this particular recipe for generations.
So I got to ask you a question. This is not a frequently asked question.
Okay.
But you talk around here about something called a turducken. And
Yeah.
I don't know that everybody worldwide, if you're in Beijing right now, you have no idea what a turducken is. Explain to us what a turducken is.
Well, I'll explain it, but let me let you know that we don't eat that for Thanksgiving.
Okay.
Thanksgiving, I actually do a deep fried turkey.
Okay.
And if they've never had that, you've not had turkey yet. This is spectacular. Okay. But a turducken is our Christmas meat,
Okay.
and we eat that on Christmas Eve after the last of our 100 million services we do. Okay.
Yeah.
So a turducken is, the Cajuns figured out how to debone duck, chicken, and turkey while leaving it one piece of meat at the same time.
gosh.
So all the bones are out, but it's still one piece of meat. So it's a boneless but whole duck, turkey, chicken. So they take the duck and they stuff sausage into the cavity of this deboned duck. Then they take that duck and put it into the cavity
My gosh.
of a deboned chicken. And then they take that chicken and put it into the cavity of a deboned turkey. And there's no bones in it, so whenever you bake it, it swells up like bread, and you slice it like bread, and you're getting 4 different kinds of meat all the way through, and it's called a turducken.
I can imagine some Cajun playing with Russian nesting dolls and then looking at some birds and going, I've got an idea. That's how that probably played out. So we're going to get to our guest. We have a legend on the podcast today, and I'm going to let you introduce our guest. So excited about all we're going to talk about today.
Well, and honestly, we can't talk about how much food we eat, because the topic we're going to talk about today is talk about those who don't have a single meal to their names. Mm-hmm. And today, the legend is someone that I've grown to deeply, deeply love and admire, who leads one of the largest charities in America, a Christian or non-Christian. And of course, this one's very Jesus-focused and Jesus-based, Convoy of Hope, who, if you've been a podcast listener or a subscriber for any amount of time, you know this is one of our valued partners. And we don't put very many ministries directly in front of you, and never put one in front of you that we don't personally believe in, give to. And I just want to go ahead and get to the bottom line, Matt, right off the bat, and that is my goal in this podcast is for you to get a heart for the poor like you've never had it before, and then I'm hoping that every one of you church leaders are going to be a part, have Convoy of Hope as one of your ministry partners in the missions space. And if you're not a church leader, if you're a leader just listening to this, talk to your pastor about your church being a part of Convoy.
In fact, Convoy is ready for you, all the GrowLeader listeners out there. You can go right now to convoyofhope.org/GrowLeader and hear more about how we partner with them and how you can be a part of that as well. But excited to have the founder of Convoy of Hope on with us today.
Hal, welcome to the GrowLeader podcast.
It's great to be with you. Thank you, Chris and Matt. Thank you so much. Yeah. I'm already hungry, though, listening to you guys.
Yeah.
So,
well,
thank you.
You just finished speaking to our students. And before we get into this, the podcast studio here is on the campus of Highlands College. And man, what an amazing chapel, which, by the way, everybody can go to our YouTube channel of Highlands College and watch this chapel service. But my goodness, you blew these students away today.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, I had one regret. I wish I had brought my 4 daughters, because what an incredible campus this is. And the student body, unbelievable. I don't know that I've ever seen students so united and so enthusiastic about serving God. That was really inspiring.
Well, thank you. You talked about your story, and you talked about how Convoy of Hope began, the impact you're making today, and then we got even into training our students how to do disaster response in their local churches one day when they're leaders, about missions. I personally think a bunch of them were stirred by God to make this a part of their calling, that God was calling them into compassion ministry. And I want our audience to understand kind of where the story began, if you will, and why you are in this type of ministry even today. Let's tell a bit of that story today.
Yeah, when I was 12, my parents were hit by a drunken driver, and my father was killed instantly. My mother was seriously injured in the hospital for a number of months, really fighting for her life, trying to recover. And as a kid, my parents didn't have insurance, and so we really we struggled financially. Had to live on welfare and food stamps and handouts. But there was a family that took us in, and Bill and Levada Davis were their names, and they owned a small trailer. That's all they owned, a single wide trailer, and all 10 of us lived in a trailer. They had kids of their own. And this family, they sacrificed their privacy, they drained their savings account so 4 kids could have a home. And I often say that, to this day, I believe I didn't become bitter. I didn't choose a life of bitterness in large part because a family showed me the power of kindness. Wow. And that really is the root of Convoy of Hope.
And then you actually felt this call on your own life, and you started, exposing yourself to homeless people. Even, you told the story of how you went to the midnight shift with police officers just to touch and feel the needs of America. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I felt like escaping poverty. The way to do that was through education. I earned several degrees. I began writing books in my 20s. One of those book projects took me to Calcutta, India. And when I landed, the people I was writing the book for, they said, well, we want you to interview Mother Teresa for our book.
Wow.
And so in the course of my interview...
What was that like, by the way?
Yeah, for real.
A lot different than I thought it would be.
Yeah.
She was very personable, very kind, very interested in my personal life. I kept wanting to talk about theology, and she was wanting to keep it to the practical.
Wow.
And so in the course of the interview, she just said, young man, may I ask you, what are you doing to help the poor and the suffering? And I said, well, I'm really not doing much of anything. And she said, well, everyone can do something. Just do the next kind thing that God puts in front of you. And that was very convicting. I went back to my hotel room that night, and I had a lot of tears. I just began saying, God, I need to change. My priorities need to change. And I came back to the States, and I was praying one day, that prayer, God, take me where you want to take me. Use me where you want to use me. And I felt like he compelled me while I was praying to do something quite unusual, to travel to 8 cities and to live in the streets for 3 days and 3 nights.
Wow.
I went to Miami, Atlanta, Chicago, D.C., New York, walked the streets interviewing drug addicts and gang members, prostitutes, runaways with a hidden tape recorder, and rode with the police on the midnight shift, went to crack houses, jail cells, seedy bars, and I really saw the underbelly of America. And God used that experience really to get a hold of my heart. And I like to say that he had to do a work in my heart before he could do a work through my hands.
Wow.
And 29 years ago, came back from visiting one of those cities and loaded up a pickup truck with $300 worth of groceries and started giving them out to migrant farm workers in Northern California and telling them, Jesus loves you, we love you. There's a church right down the street that loves you too. And that was the start of Convoy of Hope. And since that time, God has smiled on it and has grown it exponentially.
Yeah, and put it in perspective, I know you won't say this about it yourself. You're such a humble servant of God, my friend. But more than $600 million worth of goods and funds flow through this ministry every year now. And you guys are feeding more than 500,000 children every single day. And you're one of our primary partners in the space of compassion ministry, and of course in disaster response as well. You do a lot of things, but those are the places that we're very, very proud to be involved with what you're doing. I want you to talk a little bit about who Convoy of Hope is today, and then what the opportunity is for the pastors that are listening. And let me just say directly to the pastors, Matt, that in my mind, you really can't have a proper ministry, like real ministry, Jesus style ministry, without having compassion ministries as a part of what you do, both locally and abroad. And so if you don't have a plan, then I would say begin with what Convoy does. They can even come alongside you, and they're very local church centered. They come alongside you, and they can train you in local disaster response, stand right beside you in that, and be a part of it, helping you with the commodities that you need, both in everyday compassion ministry, but also when disasters happen, like they happen here all the time with tornadoes etc. But then also in places where we can't be. You are our partners in Ukraine right now.
Right.
You're our partners in the Middle East. You're our partners in the Hawaii wildfires. First thing that when people said, "Hey, what are we doing, Pastor Chris? What is Highlands doing for Hawaii?" Oh, we're giving to Convoy of Hope, who's doing that.
And the way that plays out, and we get asked all the time, even about, Serve Day is something we're passionate about in the summertime in July. Giving Hope, something we do in December. Smaller churches will ask, hey, how do we start that? And I think Convoy is your best way to get into that. I mean, Convoy can teach you all you need to know, provide you with the resources and the tools. But I'm able to stand on a stage at the Grandview campus, the campus I get to lead, and say, when there's an earthquake in Afghanistan, hey, everybody, the giving that you're giving, it's there, it's on the ground, it's working right now because of the partner that we have there in Convoy of Hope and the work that they do. It's huge for us.
So give us the scope of it.
Yeah.
Talk to us all about all that you do today and what the opportunity is for the pastors that are listening.
Yeah, I think on the disaster relief side, Convoy of Hope does want to train churches so that they're prepared when disaster hits their community. And so they can do that by simply sending us an email, and we will follow up. We want to send people to them. We're not asking for anything from them other than to train and mobilize an army. We feel like our calling in large part is to activate the church. And so that is really what we do. When churches invite us to come in, as you have here, our job is to train and get them ready, because you never know when a disaster will happen, right? And I think the other thing is that in places like Ukraine and Middle East, Hawaii that you mentioned, churches may not be able to be on the ground. But people can take to the bank the fact that when there is really a medium-sized disaster somewhere in the world, across the United States, the Convoy of Hope will be there representing them. And so pastors, leaders can stand up in their pulpit on a Sunday morning and they can tell their people, hey, you don't have to give to XYZ organization that's secular, that's not going to minister to spiritual needs and not going to elevate the name of Jesus and lift up the local church. Here's another organization that we partner with that's on the ground, is really best in show. I think that's the reputation, that we do what we say we're going to do. We're going to operate with a high level of integrity. But a pastor can stand up, a leader can stand up and say, whether it's a church or a business, they can know that the job is getting done and we're representing them well.
I love that. And I want to make sure the pastors and leaders who are listening to this hear this, because this is a value that we have here at Highlands and at GrowLeader. And that is, we believe that parachurches should not be ministries unto themselves. They should come alongside the local church, because once the ministry that those parachurch ministries provide or is done, the church, it's the church that keeps it ongoing. And that's
right.
What I love most about you guys, is that you're not the hero in the story. You're really making Jesus and the local church the hero in the story. You come alongside, but it's not just money given. Right. Churches, I want you to hear this. They're not just looking for a check or for us to, them to be a part of our missions budgets. Man, they can come inside your local church and train you in disaster response so that you know how to do it in your local area. And I just love that about you guys and your passion for the local church. Yeah, it's huge.
Well, I think even with outreaches, community outreach, that's something we love to train churches in how to really understand best practices, what to do, what not to do. And so we can help them stretch their missions dollars in their own community. But it really begins with that invitation, will you come?
Would you make one more point to the pastors? Because a lot of times pastors think, well, if I give to another missions ministry, that's gonna, take from the growth of our church. But we believe that when you're involved in compassion-based ministries, it actually grows the church. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I have to tell you, Chris and Matt, I have never heard a church complain, never. In 29 years, a church complain about the fact that giving to the poor has detracted from their mission. I've heard just the opposite, that when we did this for the poor and the suffering, God in turn multiplied many times over what we've given. That's the message we hear time and again.
And I love that. And so, pastors, I want you to go to convoyofhope.org/GrowLeader, and we'll get you connected. And when you do that, by the way, you're not going to get an email. You're going to get a person who's going to call you and walk you through the process, find out what your needs are. And I'm very excited about that.
PC, can you talk about, because since the beginning, I want you to go back to where you're planning Church of the Highlands. You've had this philosophy of we're not going to recreate the wheel if somebody else is doing this thing better than we could do it already. You've had this strategy of partnership, since day one.
Yeah.
For the pastor that's out there who feels all this stress of, I've got to do my own food bank. I've got to do my own, my own shelter. I've got to help people. Talk about just the philosophy of partnership, why it's better, and then how I'd love for you to speak into how you're able to go in and actually help those pastors in that situation.
Well, I've always believed that there are going to be some things that you are going to be best in the world at. I think, we're building a college, and so we're not pushing people to other colleges. No, I think we're building a world-class college experience. But for a lot of things, we don't think we can replicate it or even become better at it. So we don't compete with those who are actually better at it than we could ever become. We partner with them. But our filter is very tight, and that is all of our partnerships have to love the local church because, again, we're going to be the ones that are going to stay with that person who gets fed or stay with that person whose tree gets cut off their house. Like, we're going to pastor them for decades to come, Lord willing. And so that's really important to us, is that they're local church, and then we're always going to give to ministries that also have Jesus connected. One of the points that we made to the students today, and that is, because this generation is so social justice focused, that if you have social justice, which I believe in, by the way, that doesn't have spiritual justice, that's not justice. The greatest gift has been withheld. If we feed the whole world and they go to hell, we lose. Now, we don't want to not feed the whole world either. We're not just saying, just take our Jesus. We don't care about your needs. No. Social justice and spiritual justice have to go hand in hand. And so this is a viable part about what we do. But that's what we believe, is that we find someone who is just the best in the industry. And in my opinion, that is Convoy of Hope.
And how are you helping most when you go into it for the pastor of a church of 200 or 300 people?
Yeah.
What are the things you help with most when you walk into that situation?
Well, first they need to know that we don't chase money. We never have. When there's a disaster, Convoy of Hope responds. Our team is deployed without any concern for money. We don't want them worrying about money. We want them focused on meeting needs, elevating the local church, and lifting up the name of Jesus.
Right.
Okay, so we're not after their money. We are after their relationship, though, because we believe that God is going to knit the church together unlike any time in our history. We're interested in establishing a movement of compassion. And so we need lots of churches, thousands of churches to link arms. And we can do that certainly in times of disaster, but also in community outreach. And so when they contact Convoy, what they're really doing is they're extending an invitation to a friendship, a relationship. Money is not what we're after.
So great. So I want to hear, because I love the way that it's grown. Started off with $300 of groceries in the back of a pickup truck in Northern California. That is not where you guys are today. So talk a little bit about the way the ministry has grown. You've opened up some new facilities recently. Tell us about that.
And let me add to that question too. You're an amazing leader.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, because this goes beyond just, I have a heart for the poor. No, brother, you had to do something right. To build the organization at this size. And everyone listening wants to be a better leader. Everybody that's on this podcast right now is saying, man, how did Hal go from groceries in the back of his car to this incredibly large ministry? What are some leadership principles? And you talked about one of them with the students, with this whole faith miracle walk that has propelled you into your future. Unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, I feel like we have followed the miracles for 29 years.
Explain that, though.
Yeah, it's God has demonstrated, shown His will, pointed us in a direction when He performs a miracle. I use this example that God had, just last week, God provided a $2 million gift for a distribution center in Atlanta, right? So He points you in a direction by performing the miraculous. There are so many stories like that where Convoy, I believe, has grown because we've been willing to follow the miracles. Even though it wasn't a direction that we were planning to go.
That's so good.
If God is doing a miracle there, then He's probably in it. And so we'll pursue it. We've done that for many, many years. And I shared this morning, too, that, as a leader, the number one thing you can do is become a spiritual magnet. Make sure people trust you. They trust your heart, God entrusts to those He trusts. So become a leader that people and also God can trust, because then He will flow resources through you. And for Convoy of Hope, that's been the case. And never set out to to build a billion-dollar organization. Never was the goal. It was just trying to be obedient to the next step.
Yeah, and that's what I appreciate about you so much. Hey, we have a few minutes. Let's just tell some stories.
Okay.
Let's close with tell us what's going on in Ukraine. Like, give us some inside scoop and
Sure.
how's the church doing, and just kind of catch us all up on some of the things that a lot of us are already giving in our part and partnering with you.
Yeah.
So tell some fun stories of stuff that's happening around the world for us.
Yeah, we started with a warehouse in Poland because that seemed to make the most sense, and then Romania, that seemed to make the most sense. And we set up a network of 350 churches that really about 80% of the country, so they're really branched out geographically. And so our job was to continue to resource 350 churches inside Ukraine. I'm not going to tell you where the warehouse is at, but we've been able to move from Poland and Romania right inside Ukraine. And so on a really a daily basis, trucks are rolling, ministering to the churches. And what it's really doing, it's elevating the local church in these communities. When this war is over, the church is going to be standing tall.
Wow.
Why? Because they're the ones that have been giving out the food and the supplies. And that's really typical of what Convoy does in the United States and around the world. We work through the local church because at some point Convoy of Hope will be gone. We want to lift up Jesus and lift up the church.
I remember when I was at the event that you guys had recently where we were first introduced.
Yeah.
You even told the story of one of those truck drivers who, as bullets are basically flying over the truck, this brave soul. I mean, talk about a missionary.
Yeah.
Who's some would see only as a truck driver, but is actually going into places where the wars are actually happening and serving people. That touched my heart. So much stories like that, and of course people are getting saved and getting fed, and the church is strong. And so anyway, it's very impactful. Anything you can tell us about what's happening right now in the Middle East? All of us are very concerned of what's happening in that part of the world.
Yeah, certainly. People again can count on Convoy of Hope to do what we say we're going to do and to operate at the highest level of integrity. We like to underpromise and overdeliver. It's just who we are. And so when the war broke out, we really went to many of our partners and we figured out a way to get supplies across the border into Gaza. So right now there is a stream of food and supplies going into Gaza. Really can't talk much about it, but again, we're just doing what we say we would do.
I appreciate that, and that's the confidence I have standing on the stage and saying, hey, by the way, if you're wondering if anything's happening, as the whole world is screaming, no one's doing anything. Everybody's leaving them high and dry.
Yeah.
No. We're working with partners. Can't talk about it for security reasons.
Right.
But I can give you with great confidence that we are there. And by the way, pastors, that is bolstered giving, I don't want to say to Highlands, I would say through Highlands, into these ministries in a huge way, that this is one of the best ways to grow a church. Tell us about what happened in Hawaii, because that is something that was front and center as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's, again, because we've done so many outreaches on the islands, island after island. And I mean, I remember one outreach we did, and there were over 16,000 people who showed up. And the local police force had to come to us and say, hey, you've blocked up the highway. The highway is blocked up. And so you really need to cut this off. And so we have relationship there. And that's what's the beauty of the church. The church is everywhere.
I love
right?
it.
And so long-standing relationships, in a matter of hours, we're up and we're working. So.
As we close the program today, we've talked a lot about disaster response and just bringing compassion, care, but really Convoy is quite broader than that. You have other ministries like in agricultural areas and training. Would you unpack that so that everybody's really getting the full scope of who you are?
Yeah, so we were feeding 530,000 children a day, and one of the things that we found is we feed them in schools. By feeding them in schools, parents keep the kids in school. Otherwise, they're going to be out on street corners begging or scavenging off of garbage heaps.
So good.
Right? But we learned to go beyond the feeding of children. There's really an integration of 3 pillars.
Okay.
And they all work together. So when we take the mothers of these children and we help them start their own businesses, so they're feeding their own children, right? Within time, within a year, they can start feeding their own children. So they'll go through a training. It's discipleship based. And then same with the farmers. We help them increase their yields 100, 200, 300%. So it's really the integration of these 3 pillars beyond disaster response that's really enabling us to change the fortune of communities.
All right, we're going to close the program, but any final I want you to heartfelt talk to a pastor. What would you say if they're kind of listening to this, wondering what to do? I'm going to give you just this altar call, if you will, just to say, hey, man, come on. This is something that we would love for you to be a part of. Say that to the pastor right now.
Pastor, hey, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching today. And please know this, that Convoy of Hope is not like many other organizations that are truly about building Convoy. We're not. We're about building the church. And 12 years ago, Convoy of Hope repositioned itself underneath God's spigot of his blessing, his favor. And when we did that, Convoy of Hope has grown at 20% a year for 12 consecutive years. It started with repositioning our hearts and our mission. You are our mission. When we repositioned ourselves to focus on helping you and helping your church, everything changed for Convoy of Hope. Our focus is on the church. And will you link arms with us to really launch a movement across our country to really, as Paul says in Galatians chapter 2, to help the poor and the suffering.
I love it. And this is the season to do it in, Matt. In fact, we're working all of our plays, if you will, our playbook of touching people during the holiday season, which I think is the most opportune time to do it, because people feel their pain, I think, more during the holiday season. So we have all of our outreaches getting ready to happen, including just simple acts of kindness cards that we'll distribute on the first Sunday of December, our Giving Hope, et cetera. And so to all the churches that are listening, we're happy to give you all those playbooks as well, so that you can touch those that are hurting and to reach those who have never heard.
Yeah, we can all get better at this, every single one of us. And so whether it's going to the GrowLeader site and utilizing our resources there, or going to convoyofhope.org/GrowLeader, let's get better. Let's get better at helping people in the name of Jesus. Hal, thank you so much.
Thanks, Matt.
So excited to have you here today.
Thank you.
Hey, everybody, have the best Thanksgiving. We have so much to be thankful for. We love that you're listening. We're thankful for you. Have a great Thanksgiving. We'll see you next time on the GrowLeader podcast.
God bless you.
Hey, everybody, thank you so much for listening to this episode. And we also want to say a big thank you to all of our partners that help make the GrowLeader podcast happen each and every month. The first is Compassion International. For over 70 years, they have served the most vulnerable children in the world in Jesus' name. Through the power of the local church, they've impacted over 2.3 million children, and they're not stopping anytime soon. Learn more about how you can be a part of what they're doing at compassion.com/GrowLeader. The next is our newest partner, Studio C. Studio C can help you know your people and grow your church. They combine strategy, technology, and communications to maximize church member engagement. You can bridge the engagement gap and transform your church's impact with Studio C. Learn more about them at their website. It's thestudioc.org/GrowLeader. And finally, a big thank you to the Wesleyan Investment Foundation. For over 80 years, the Wesleyan Investment Foundation has helped churches with their borrowing and their investing needs. Whether you're dreaming of a new opportunity or seeking wise counsel about resource management, WIF can assist you. You can learn more about them at wifonline.com/GrowLeader.